Happy birthday, Ted. I'm going to talk about plenoptic perspectives and, subtitle Pyramids in the Air. And I think maybe only Ted, you know where this is going. Does anybody else know where this is going? Oh, okay, some people do. And, I'll explain for the rest of you. Pyramids have been mentioned, so no need to explain more about them. I just want to point out that not only is it Ted, your most cited paper, but it's also a paper that people tweet about. Right? So you can see that on the right. And I don't think anybody has ever tweeted about a paper that I have written. No, will they? And you can ask yourself whether you have papers that people have tweeted about. But here it is, oldies but goldies. Okay, Peter, is that okay? Oldies, but yeah, okay. Or on the left are just two slides I pulled from a course that I'm teaching at Stanford, and these are the first two slides of the chapter multi-resolution image processing, and of course it's you start out with image pyramids, right? So these are not the pyramids I'm going to be talking about. These are the land-based pyramids, if you like, pyramids on land. But I'm going to be talking about pyramids in the air. Now, TED has inspired all of us, but sometimes TED needs inspiration too. And one of his inspirations have been the Leonardo's notebooks that you might recognize here. On the left, there are some 15th or 16th century Italian written from the right to the left. Do you see that? He had this weird habit of actually writing in mirror script. Maybe that was a way of protecting his intellectual property, but who knows, right? If your Italian is rusty, you can read on the right what he's writing about, and there they are, the pyramids in the air. Everybody in light and shade fills the surrounding air with infinite images of itself. And these, by infinite pyramids diffused in the air, represent the body throughout space, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a little picture that makes clear what is meant by that. You can look at an object from all angles, and if you pick a particular vantage point and all the rays extending to the body, they form some kind of pyramid. So, of course, this is Leonardo da Vinci, and I think of Leonardo as basically being the Ted Adelson of his age. I mean, if this isn't proof enough, I don't know whether you have ever noticed that Leonardo and Adelson are near anagrams, right? So, and I think off by one letter, and of course there's also visual proof that I have here, right? So, so Ted, with more modern tools, of course, he picked up the pyramids in the air idea, very elegantly, with a little math, and called it the Plenoptic function. And there it is. It's the only formula in this talk. I mean, that's, in my opinion, the maximum that you can have on a Saturday morning. So the Plenoptic function is a 7-dimensional function. Vx, Vy, Z are a vantage point in space. There are arrays of angles of phi and theta that can pass through this point in space. There's time and there's wavelength. So P is the intensity then of a light ray passing through this. And for a vision scientist, this is the entire world. Think about it, right? It's I mean, a physicist will not agree with that. I mean, it's way too limiting. But for a vision scientist, visually that captures everything. So this had a lot of consequences, a lot of impact. I'm going to talk a little bit about impact of this idea in the remaining minutes. But I just want to point out something interesting. Is if I remember correctly, Ted, I guess Plenoptic wasn't the first choice. And I'm not sure whether it was for the function or the camera that I'm going to talk about in a moment, the Plenoptic camera. There was the word holoscopic, I think, was the initial word. And is that true? Was it for the camera or the function or both? Both, okay. So I think the paper was actually submitted with the holoscopic function, but then it turned out that wasn't the greatest choice of word, and you can see that here. I just typed this into the Google Ngram viewer, and you can see that the word holoscopic had already been used for some other stuff. Particularly in the 40s, holoscopic was popular. But Plenoptic hadn't, right? So you can see the rise of the word Plenoptic basically through Ted's work after that idea was introduced. And then, there's an interesting dip and then rise again, and that undoubtedly has to do with the commercialization of the Plenoptic camera that followed some years later. Before I talk about capturing the Plenoptic function, which is actually not that easy. I'll talk about the display part first. And of course, being at MIT, I need to have a slide of Ivan Sutherland, Swords of Damocles here on the left, the ultimate display. Right? It's basically a head-mounted display. This was the first one of it. Today these are ubiquitous. The New York Times has sent out some years ago little cardboard sets that you can stick your mobile phone in, and you have a little bit of software, and basically you have a head-mounted display. Everybody's familiar with those. So you can, of course, only explore a slice always of the Plenoptic function, but this is a good way of exploring what the Plenoptic function represents. So the display part is relatively straightforward. The capture part is a lot harder. So that's where Ted's work on the Plenoptic camera comes in. Shortly after, or actually pretty much at the same time that he imagined the Plenoptic function, the Plenoptic camera was published. And the idea is very elegant. You have a large lens, but then you put a lenticular sheet in front of your sensor array, and that lets individual sensors basically peek through a little sub-aperture of your big lens. And it depends on how many sensor elements you combine there. You could just divide the lens into 2 parts or 4, or maybe 8 by 8, etc. So this is all comprised in this, and I think the paper particularly explored this as a way of learning more about the scene, particular depth of the scene, and as a kind of a starting point for better scene understanding. Now the technology, not with Ted's involvement as far as I'm aware, but independently was commercialized then by a company that spun out of Stanford, Lytro, attracted over $200 million in investment, had a run from 2006 to 2018, and was basically exactly this concept. It turned out that this was not a viable product. Cell phones camera phones have overtaken the need for a camera like this, and you could do nifty things with this, like defocusing or refocusing the image after it had been captured, but not much more, right? And you sacrifice the spatial resolution. So I think 2018 was the end of this company. The technology, however, interestingly, and I'm not even sure whether you're aware of that, Ted, survives in what's called dual pixel autofocus. And that started out in 2013 and is becoming a mainstream technology now for camera phones. So what is dual pixel autofocus? If you let me see, does this work? Yeah. If you look at the individual sensor elements, there's a little lens between every sensor element, and you basically see a Bayer pattern here. But it's divided into two, and it's usually left and right. But sometimes they also do it diagonally or vertically, so they don't just have a horizontal, but maybe a diagonal and or vertical parallax in there. And they use this subdivision, which is basically gives you stereo through the camera lens, as Ted had described in the Plenoptic camera paper, to drive autofocus very accurately across the visual field, not just at discrete points, but the key is that you can do it everywhere in the image. Now, if you want to capture more of the Plenoptic function, things get harder, right? If you look at the Litro camera and why this didn't go on, well, I mean, there's still a viewport looking out into the world. It's not 360 all around you. And it's a very limited baseline, right? You want to really sample over larger space, particularly to support head motion. People have been building various arrays that I show here. This is my opportunity to also slip in a little bit of our own recent research in the last years here. So this is something that we built in my lab, where we basically use two Facebook 360 cameras and stack them on top of each other. We did that because we are particularly interested in the importance of vertical head motion parallax in perception. Just to give you some idea, these are measures here, 14 cameras per ring, so this is 28 cameras now with 6-fold overlap. And it's more or less portable with a battery, so you can actually move it around on campus and record videos with that. And my student John Tate, who graduated last year, did that and recorded a lot of stuff. So this is an interesting subjective study here in this context that I want to share with you here. It's basically asked the question: how important is it actually for 3D perception of the world that you support head motion parallax in your imagery? And you can do that, of course, easily now with head-mounted displays as an experimental setup. And here, you see 6 different conditions being compared. There's always mono and stereo. Mono meaning you present the same image to both eyes. And then there's different conditions with parallax, right? No parallax is self-explanatory. Nothing changes in your head-mounted display as you move the head. Horizontal only, as you only support horizontal parallax, and full parallax is horizontal and vertical parallax supported. And and on the vertical axis is differential mean opinion score, and a 7-point Likert scale. So 3 points difference is a very big improvement. And the interesting thing here is that head motion parallax is by far the biggest effect here, right? It's more important than stereo, which is maybe not that surprising because you move your head more than your eyes are apart, right? So that gives you a lot more information about the world. Now stereo can even hurt you a little bit, but generally it's roughly neutral unless you have full head motion parallax support, including vertical parallax support. So that was a surprising finding. And then, if you put everything together correctly, then stereo really also helps. You want to have stereo in this situation. Just to give you an idea, this was sedentary as a setup. So, horizontal head motion 30, plus minus 30 centimeter, vertically plus minus 9 centimeters. Now, I thought for a birthday present for Ted, what's the ideal birthday present for Ted? You can't really come to his party and bring a bottle of wine, or you have to do something more special. And I think the best birthday present for Ted is a visual illusion that he's not familiar with. And one of the things that Ted has taught us is, of course, how powerful understanding visual illusions is to understand the human visual system. So here's an illusion that we don't fully understand, but that we discovered as part of these experiments that I just described. And we've been referring to it as the monocular size illusion, which is not a great name, so maybe we can call it Ted's birthday illusion instead. So here it goes. You do this in a head-mounted display, and you display an object, maybe 90 degrees apart or so in the same visual world that you're creating, except that one version of the object is just rendered as in a monocular manner. So identical images to both eyes. There's still head motion parallax and everything. It's just the same image to both eyes, while the other one is rendered with stereo. And it turns out that the size of these two versions of the same object is perceived vastly differently. So you can measure that by just letting people with a slider adjust the size of the objects so they appear the same size to them. And that's what we show here on the right. So you see it's horizontally is distance of the object from the viewer in diopters, right? So 1 is 1 meter, 2 is 50 centimeters, etc. And you see it's actually a huge effect, right? It's over like 1.7, almost up to 2x in size. Okay, so we don't completely understand that. It's in Giant's thesis in an appendix, but it hasn't really been explored or studied sufficiently. So that's my birthday present for you, Ted. So with that, I conclude. And thank you, Ted, for being a visionary and an inspiration for all of us, and for being a friend.
Any quick questions?
Or an answer would be great, too, for that.
Okay. Let's thank Bernd again. Thank you, Bernd. Thank you. And our last speaker for the session is Ron Dror.